Welcome to another virtual Lunch and Learn in our series for Strata Council members. My name is Catherine Squires-Basson. I'm the Director of Culture and Community here at Proline. We offer, as you probably know by now, but just in case you don't, a number of different opportunities for learning, both for our Strata Council members and residents and owners in our Strata communities. This one is a Lunch and Learn today. Sorry, there's no lunch included for these virtual Lunch and Learns, but there is a lot of flexibility. They are opportunities for council members to hear directly from service providers and from professionals and to learn more about specific items that impact your stratas. Please note that today's session is being recorded. My most commonly asked question, these sessions are always recorded. We can always send you a copy, and for everyone who is registered for one of these sessions, you'll automatically receive an email with a link to the recording in the days following the event. So you'll always be able to access it, even if something comes up at the last minute. And then you'll also be able to share it with other council members. We also post these recordings on our YouTube channel so that there's information available for you and future council members. There will also be time for questions at the end of the presentation. So hold your questions and please use the Q&A function. You'll see it down there at the bottom, not the chat, because other people can't see the questions in the chat. But if you use the Q&A function, everyone can see them and we can answer them publicly. So use that to type in your question and then we'll address them at the end of the session. And I think that's all of the details I need to cover before we jump in. I'm going to hand it over to Christy Tamburi, Strata Property Manager, one of our managing brokers and one of the managers of our Strata department, to introduce today's speaker.
Excellent. Thanks, Catherine. And welcome everyone. Today we have Garry Muir with Garry Muir Plumbing. Proline and Garry Muir Plumbing have had a very long-term relationship, both being family-run businesses. I think we've been working together to help serve our mutual clients for the last at least 25 years, which is pretty incredible. So I'm not going to say much more than that. Gary's got a bunch of exciting plumbing stuff to talk about. So we will launch right in and Gary's going to get started. Thanks.
Hey, yeah, hi everybody. So for those that don't know me, I'm Garry Muir. Like Christy mentioned, I've been working for Proline for years. I come from a family of plumbers, unfortunately. My dad was a plumber. He's still involved a little bit with the company. And then my grandpa was a plumber. So my dad started the company in '93. Before that, he did construction work, mainly plumbing. And then when he went into business, he wanted to do mostly service work. He liked working with people, problem solving, all that stuff. So I started full-time plumbing in 1998. And again, I did a bit of construction when I was learning, but service is what I've done now for almost 30 years, 28 years now. So I like service work. I like meeting all the people, helping people out, solve these problems. And some days it's frustrating. It's not always fun doing service work, but most days it's really good. So yeah, so and I guess today we're just going to talk about the important things to maintain in condo buildings. I'm not going to teach everybody about everything about plumbing, but just mainly the common problems we come across, the questions everybody's asking, stuff like that. So yeah, so we'll get into first the most common thing. Actually, I guess first we'll talk about what we're going to go over. First thing we're going to start off is with drainage systems. One of the most important things to maintain in a building. And then we'll go into the potable water system, your drinking water, piping problems, poly bead piping, stuff like that, and what to do about it, how to prevent floods in buildings, and then I'll tell you a few crazy stories we've come across. So anyways, so we will jump first into the sanitary drainage system. That consists of your toilet water, your sink water, your bathroom sinks, your laundry, all that stuff. Basically anything other than rainwater that's coming down your drain. So anything you use to brush your teeth, anything goes down your sinks, bathtubs, and that's your sanitary system. And then we'll jump into the sanitary drainage stack system. So this is the most common thing we deal with in buildings. I'm sure all of you guys have asked me or a plumber, what are stacks? Why do we have to maintain them? Probably depreciation reports have mentioned getting your stacks cleaned and flushed and that every year. So sanitary drainage stacks, what are they? They're the pipes that run within the building's walls. So this is a sanitary drainage system, stack system. So these are your pipes, these are your stacks coming down in the building. So all the water from unit sinks. So if you picture this is a unit like kitchen sink, this would be a kitchen sink, this would be a kitchen sink. All this wastewater from the sinks drains down the stack and then into the ground or into the parquet, and then out the lateral to the main sewer outfall. So what happens when they aren't regularly maintained, especially with kitchen stacks, is they start building up with grease, sludge, grime, and all that stuff. And then eventually they block. When they block, they can cause big floods in units. What happens is the blockages usually happen at the base of the stack. So if you're in a 3-story building like the one I built here, or a 15-story building, everybody using water in their own kitchen sinks, if that stack blocks down here, the poor person on the first floor, second floor, or wherever they're located is going to have a bunch of wastewater coming up through their sink, overflowing. If they're not home, it can make a big mess in a unit. We've seen a lot of damage from the stacks backing up. And the worst is when somebody comes home from holidays and sees their kitchen floor covered in black grease that stinks and everything else that comes out the stack. So yeah, very important to maintain the stacks. The other reason why you want to maintain them is if you don't maintain them, especially with buildings with cast iron piping, is that grease and that will sit on the walls of the pipe. So there's always people are going to be using Drano, liquid plumber, and all that stuff. So those chemicals get into that grease and they always sit there in that grease because that grease is sitting there. And then those chemicals start wearing away on the cast iron pipe. They take out the little lining on the pipe and then it starts rusting that pipe away. So we're coming across now a lot of older buildings where the cast iron pipe's starting to rust. It's some of it's due to age, a lot of it though, it's usually the kitchen stacks that are rusted out. And the reason why is because the stacks were never cleaned or very few times cleaned. And it's just that grease has always been sitting in there and all that stuff in that grease starts eating away on the pipes. So that's another reason why. So if the stacks aren't backing up, it's still, you should maintain them every year, especially if buildings have guardrails and stuff like that, because guarantees the kitchen stacks are going to back up in time. Buildings, we get asked about a lot if same with the bathroom stacks. Should the bathroom stacks in that be clean? That meaning where your toilet water, bathtubs and all that go into. We don't see them block too frequently from build up in the pipes. What usually happens there is somebody will be flushing wipes or cat litter or rice or something down a toilet, and it'll get in the main stack there for the toilets, and then it'll back it up. If it's usually just regular use, they do get a bit of buildup on them, but they don't need to be cleaned as much as kitchen sink stacks. And cleaning the stacks, we can clean a bathroom stack and the very next day someone can flush a bunch of wipes on the toilet. It gets down in the stack and backs the place up. So bathroom stacks, we'll get on a little bit later in the presentation. We'll talk about how often they should be cleaned, but kitchen stacks are the main focus in the buildings. So yeah, that's why it's important to maintain them. So how we clean them is, we get asked now a lot of the property managers, strata, people on strata that say, we need a quote to do stacks from the roof. And I'll go out a lot of times to buildings and I'll say, you can only get half the stacks from the roof. And people say, well, someone else, we had it done last year. It was all clean from the roof. So most buildings from mid-90s and up, they'll do, so your older buildings, all the stacks, the vents would come through the roof. So if you picture, this would be your roof line here. And then these are the vents on top of the stack coming through the roof. So when we clean them, we put an auger down from the roof. Some companies use a jetter and come down on the stack. But what happens is in a lot of these new buildings, if you actually go on the roof of the buildings, you'll see very few vents. This is a vent portion coming through the roof. And so when you're cleaning it from the roof coming down, the auger or jetter isn't all of a sudden going to take this T and go down and clean this stack. It's only cleaning these portions that you get coming down from the roofs. So this is why a lot of times we'll put in quotes, cleaning stacks, and people will ask why we have to go from units. It's because most events aren't accessible from the roof. So a lot of buildings you can get them all from the roof, but a lot of your newer buildings you can't. So that's something usually we make a decision on when we come to the building. But if someone's asking, well, why is the plumber cleaning the stack from the unit? Because the unit, there's no other access point through that stack than from their kitchen sink drain. So cleaning them, for cleaning the stacks, what we like to use, we use an auger with a hose going down the drain. we find it's the best way. The auger will navigate turns. A lot of times in the stack, there's lots of bends where it's coming down. So companies that go out with jetters, you can't get that jetter around the bends because you're just pushing the jetter. The cable, when it's going down, it's twisting and it'll pull itself through those bends going down. And with cleaning, if you have a lot of grease buildup, we've done stacks for years and I've got a ton of camera inspections. It's way easier to clear the big grease buildups with that cable and the cutter blades going down than it is with a jetter. A jetter's got to go back and forth a bunch of times on it to fully clean the walls of the pipe. When you put down an auger, it goes down. It's a steel cable going down with steel blades on it, and it scours the edge of the pipe and it cleans it a lot faster. It's a lot easier to get the cables and that down. Some plumbers are going to disagree with me on this, but I can go out with any single one of them on a job and I'll show them. If I go out there with our auger and a garden hose, it's a lot easier. The main reason why I think it's better cleaning the stacks with an auger is I'm sure some of you have had plumbers out to your buildings where they're telling you to leave all the drains plugged in the unit. On top of the toilet seat, leave a weighted bag or something. The reason why is when you're putting high pressure water down a stack and all that sludge and that's coming down as you're loosening it, it'll block when it hits the bottom and it comes up high pressure and it'll shoot out that sink and can make a mess. So we've done them with jetters before and a lot of times it can make a mess in a unit. Again, with a cable going down, which is garden hose running to flush it all out, you don't have high pressure water coming up out of someone's sink or out of the toilet or something like that, making a mess in a unit. So I personally think cleaning it with the auger and a hose and just cammering it after is the best way to go cleaning these drains. So yeah, that's it on cleaning them. Next thing is, so yeah, and sorry, just to go back, we'll go back to that slide there just for a minute. So if we go back for a second, sorry, right there. Sorry, kind of jumping around. So people get asked, so that's for cleaning the stacks. And then if you're in a building, so the stack drains down, try not to hit Chrissy here. So the stack drains down and then it goes into a lateral drain here. So when people are asking, people always ask me, well, what's the difference between a stack and a lateral? They're really the same thing. The vertical stack's coming down, picking up the sinks or toilets or whatever it is, and then it drains up the lateral. So a lot of buildings where it's real difficult to clean the stacks from, and we can't get into the sink drains, but they have a parkade, we'll say go from the parkade, clean that lateral out. That lateral will give us an indication if that stack's real bad. So when you're cleaning the lateral drains out, it gives you a pretty good indication of the condition of the stack. Most of your blockages are going to occur in the horizontal portion of the lateral, not in the vertical stack coming down, unless the stack offsets. So when you have a plumber going out to give a quote on cleaning stacks, I always recommend doing both. But if it's going to be a big job to go into units and to go from the stacks coming down and people don't want their kitchens all, underneath the sink going, I would recommend cleaning the laterals from the parkade if we have access to the laterals in the parkade. And then that will then give you an indication how blocked the stack is. So you do a lateral, the plumber can make notes and say, okay, this lateral that's picking up the old one sinks, it was really blocked. So maybe we'll look at cleaning this one, but then you'll find most of the other ones are clear. So instead of wasting your time going in, clearing a bunch of things that are already clear, if you have access to the parkade, go from the parkade first, clean that lateral, and that'll give you an indication of how bad that stack is. Again, I do recommend probably doing them both if you have access to both, but if it's, if it's going to cost a fortune, sometimes just cleaning the stacks in these bigger buildings can be a $20,000 job. So if you do have access to the laterals in the parkade, check that first. So yeah, a couple of warning signs. Sorry, we'll go back to that slide one more time. So on the stacks, if you have people, so a warning sign that a stack is starting to back up is when you're not using the stack, you'll start hearing gurgling sounds in the sink. So that's a sign the stack is starting to back up. So for owners of units in that, every building I recommend telling owners and maybe reminding them once a year is if they're in their living room and they hear their sink gurgling when they're not using it, or they hear their toilet gurgling when they're not using it, or bathroom sink, don't ignore that gurgling sound. Almost every stack we go out to on a weekend when we're clearing a backed up stack that's flooded a unit, we talk to the owner or the renter, and they'll say, oh yeah, I've heard that stack, or that my sink's been gurgling for a month, I just didn't know what it was. So don't ignore the gurgling sound. It's not a normal sound that a sink should be making. So if you hear that gurgling sound, what it is, it's this, oh, the wastewater is coming down here, it's hitting that base, it's backing up a bit. And then as it backs up, it forces a bit of air in that to come up the sink. So you hear that glug, glug, glug. And then when it gets real bad, eventually all that wastewater starts coming up the sink. So I always recommend the stratas is putting a notice out to owners all the time to, if they hear these warning signs, don't ignore it and make sure you're getting them cleaned. So if the stack does start backing up on a weekend and the plumber says they can't get there for an hour, and you're like, oh my God, I got stuff coming out my sink, I can't stop it. Go to the units directly above you. So say if you're in unit 101, you want to go up to 201, 301, 401, and whatever sink it's coming up is tell those people to stop using water until a plumber can get out there, because that way it stops the backing up. So if you're ever out on a weekend, or if you come home on a weekend, your sink's uncontrollably backing up, you're calling every plumber in town, and all of us are saying, we can't get there for an hour, we're busy, and you can't stop the water, and you're trying to hold something on your sink to stop it, just run upstairs quickly, knock on all the doors, and tell them stop using water, and that'll stop the water from backing up. So yeah, that's it on stacks there. So again, I hope everybody has that. I recommend kitchen stacks, probably recommend getting them cleaned once a year in a building. If a building, some of the older buildings, you can get away with, going longer apart. This kind of varies for a lot of buildings. I shouldn't say a year for every building. Some buildings can be 2-3 years. If there's guard raiders in the building, I'd recommend doing them once a year. If there's not guard raiders, you can probably get away with 2-3 years on the kitchen stacks. And then with the bathroom stacks, the best way the bathroom stacks would be is if you check in the parquet, there's a lateral, just do the laterals, check, if they're clear, then you don't need to do the stacks. Because cleaning the bathroom stacks, if there's not individual vents on the roof, which most buildings there's not, it can be a big job. You have to pull toilets, laundry machines, you got to pull out the stacker washer dryers to get into the drains, access to the laundry stacks. So again, it varies for each building. Maybe have a plumber such as myself or somebody else, whoever the building uses, come out and check those laterals. If there is no laterals, just ask people if they've heard gurgling on the sinks or in the toilets or the bathtubs, stuff like that. If they haven't, if the building, they could probably check a few units, see how those stacks are. But yeah, the bathroom stacks and laundry won't back up nearly as often. A lot of the old buildings that are 50 years old, we've never cleaned the bathroom stacks, and they're just clear. So then when they do block, it's usually because somebody's put something down. But kitchen stacks are the main one. Make sure you're getting your kitchen stacks. And if you have access to the laterals in the parquet, then do the laterals. So that's it on stacks. So next up, we'll move to the sanitary sewer outfalls for the building. So make sure also you're getting your main sewers checked to the street. If you haven't had it done before, I'd probably get it checked once. If the sewer pipe's clear, maybe check it once a year. The reason why you want to check the outfalls is that's where everything drains into and takes the waste to the street. So if you're in a building where you got a lot of trees around, Garry oak trees, all that, bamboo trees and that, there's a possibility roots in that can be getting into the pipe. So your worst nightmare is if that main sewer backs up and everything starts coming up on the main floor. So your main sewer is, again, I think you can see me in my slide. So if you picture this like a condo building, you picture all these stacks and they all drain down to the main sewer that goes out to the street. If you get a blockage here, and if you're in a big building, doesn't really matter what size the building is, and people at home are using water, it's going to come up everywhere. And a simple camera inspection can ensure that's not going to happen in a building. So I really recommend getting the sewer outfalls checked. Again, that can be done when the stacks are being done from the roof. It's just a quick camera inspection. So, but yeah, that's one I recommend doing. So, last thing with the sanitary system is sewage pumps. So a lot of buildings, their main floor plumbing, you probably know what you're building if you have a sewage pump or not, picking up a lot of the sewage waste. So down the basements, some buildings, the whole ground floor will drain into a sewage pump system. Make sure those pumps are getting checked. If they're not getting checked, chances are one could be most of the big systems are a duplex system, meaning there's two pumps in there. You won't know when one pump has failed until the second pump fails, and then again, sewage is coming up through all the ground floor units. When we check the sewage pumps, or any other plumber that checks the sewage pumps, we can tell if, we can do an average check on the pumps and all that. We can tell if they're starting to fail. We look in the pits to see what's going into the pit. Again, if there's stuff that shouldn't be flushed down the toilets going to the pit, we can have those pits cleaned out so they're not jamming the pumps up. So it's real common in the sewage pumps or the sewage pits, grease builds up and it builds up on the float switches, and it'll weight those float switches down where they can't come up and activate the pumps. And then that can cause the system to fail too. So a lot of times we go out, big flood happens because the sewage pumps weren't working. We find it's just the system's never been checked. The float switches are caked in grease, and the float switches are what they are. They're like a float. They just come up in the pit. When they hit a certain level, it triggers the pumps to come on. So they're weighted down with grease. They can't come up. It can't trigger the pumps on. When the pumps are being checked, you always check the high water alarms work on them. So any sewage pump system should have a high water alarm on it. So if it does fail, it sets off an alarm, usually a little red light on it too, and that notifies something's going on. So if you ever hear an alarm going off in the parkade, and you're not sure what it is, stop using the sewers on the main floor and call a plumber right away if it's for the sewage pumps. On the panel, it should say if it's for the sewage pumps or not. And yeah, so real important to maintain those sewage pumps. If you don't, trust me, that's when we show up. It's usually a disaster when we show up. So make sure you get those pumps maintained. It can save a lot of money and a lot of headache in the long run. So that's it on sewage pumps and the sewage system. So moving on to the storm system. So went over the sewage system. So now this is a storm drain system to a building. Storm drains just basically collect all your rainwater wherever it's being picked up. You have area drains outside the building, you have roof drains, you have your perimeter drain system. So again, real important, you get these systems checked. They're not being checked, you won't know what problem's happening, and it's usually during one of these atmospheric rivers when the whole building starts flooding out that we come across issues. So roof drains on buildings, I'll start from the top. Probably if you're getting the stacks done for the building, I'd probably tell the plumber to check the roof drains at the same time. Most buildings don't have a whole lot of roof drains up on the roof. It's usually only, I guess it depends on how big the building is, but it doesn't take much longer to check the roof drains. You just put a camera down. Usually it's only, once you're set up there, it'd probably be only an hour or two to check those roof drains. Common causes that blocks them. A lot of the roof drains have covers on them that have blown off in the wind, but even if the covers are on them, a lot of sludge and dirt and all the granules on the roof get down in the roof drains, and they're just like stacks. It's a pipe that comes down from the roof down, and sediment that will block, or like debris and that will block down at the bottom. And then what happens, the whole thing fills up, and a lot of roof drains actually are indirectly connected. So the pipe from the roof is just dropping into an indirect connection, meaning it's not a sealed connection in the roof. So when that water backs up, it now starts coming out the walls within the building and coming down. So real important you're getting those checked. To clean them, it's not a big job to clean them. It's the same as the stack. We just put an auger down and clean it out. So yeah, so real important to work on those, the roof drains. Same with area drains around the building. So like your area drains, if they're close to a front entrance to a building, really make sure those are getting checked. Someone in the building could even check it, go around with a hose, make sure in the fall before these big atmospheric rivers are going to hit, make sure the grates are clean, they're taking a bit of water. But it's not a bad idea once in a while to have a plumber come out once a year or once every couple of years and just stick a camera down that pipe, make sure it's not broken in the ground, that there's no roots coming in, not a lot of sludge buildup. So again, it saves a lot of money in the long run. If that drain blocks and it's really raining, it's going to come right into the building. So yeah, area drains, roof drains. Another big one is your catch basin drains. So you'll see these big grates out in the parking lot. A catch basin basically it's a big box in the ground. So the drain pipe's actually on top of that box. So the way they work is all the water drains into that box in the ground, and all the sludge in that sits in the bottom of the box. So it prevents the sludge from going into the drain pipe. But if those catch basins aren't being cleaned out every once a year, every couple of years, depending on the building, is that sludge level comes up to the top of the pit, and then it blocks the pipe off. So the pipes actually, the drain pipes now within the muck in the catch basin, and then that drain can't drain. So you get a big rainfall, a massive parking lot's all sloped to that drain, and then it starts turning into a lake. So what happens when that blocks is usually we have to get a big pump out there, couple plumbers out there. It takes probably 3-4 hours just to pump the water away, just to be able to access the drain. And then when a simple just checking it, you know, you could be into a couple $1,000 bill just cleaning out that catch basin, the muck, when in the fall you could have just had it quickly checked by somebody, a plumber coming out to the building to check that sludge level. So make sure you're getting the sludge levels checked out in the catch basins. So that's an important one. So next thing on the storm drainage system is maintaining the outfalls on the, again, just like your sewer system in the building, the storm drain system, all those storm drain pipes drain into one pipe that takes it to the street on the storm drainage system. So you can imagine a big building in a rainfall, that main outfall blocks how much rainwater is going to be backing up into the parkade of the building or the parking lot, coming through the walls, because now some of the permanent drains can't drain and starts flooding buildings out. So if you haven't had the outfall checked in the building, I would get it checked. Because there's never been a problem doesn't mean there never will be a problem. Chances are it is clear, but you want to make sure it's clear. You don't want to wait till something happens on that. These ones are actually, when they back up in a big storm, it's a nightmare for us because you have constant water. We can't stop the water from coming when it's raining. So we usually have to put down big pumps. If it's in a parkade where it's spilling up the water, just setting up the pumps alone can be a couple plumbers for a day, and then running those pumps all night. It's expensive just to get to a level where we can work on the system. So make sure you're getting the storm outfalls checked along with the sewer outfalls and all that. So that's it on that part of the storm drain. We'll leave this slide up here. So next thing on this slide, and we get asked a lot about this, is the perimeter drain around the building. So if you look in the picture here, they show it as a foundation drains. So what it is, it's a perforated pipe that goes around the base of the foundation. It collects groundwater. So, and then drains that groundwater into the storm drainage system. So maintaining the perimeter drains on newer buildings, anything newer than I'd say mid-90s, early 90s, is fairly simple. There's cleanouts, and you see it in the picture, it shows cleanouts there. So we have an access point. We put a camera down and auger, hydrojet the perimeter drains. Older buildings where you don't have cleanouts on the system, you can't maintain the systems without having cleanouts. Some people will go out, you'll get companies that say they'll do a free perimeter drain camera inspection, and all they're doing is putting a camera down into a pipe that's going to be filled with a bunch of muck, and they'll tell you the whole system's filled with dirt, it's got to be replaced. Which could be true, but the only way to maintain these systems, if you ever get someone saying if it's filled with muck, oh, we'll just jet it out. You can't, if the system's filled with dirt, and if you put an auger or a jetter down, all you're going to do is force all it. So say the system's probably 3/4 blocked with dirt. Say now you put a cable down, you start forcing all that dirt around with nowhere for that to escape. All you're going to do is compact it to a corner on the system. Now all of a sudden you've created a full blockage on the system. So I usually tell people if the perimeter drain system's 3/4 filled with dirt and you're having issues within the building, is to at least dig the corners on the system, and then you can flush it out and all that dirt comes into a hole in the ground. Then after you put cleanouts on, and then you can maintain it where you can flush out just small levels of sludge before it ever gets so bad where you can't actually clean it out. If it's just a little bit of sludge in the system, yeah, you can flush it out because all the water is going to mix with the dirt and then it just runs down the outfall. But if it's almost completely blocked and somebody comes out there and says, oh no, you don't have to dig the system, we'll come out and we'll just put an auger down, I'll almost guarantee you they're going to cause more problems than what they're going to fix. So So yeah, so perma drain systems, anything newer, I'd say, you know, 90s and up, usually have cleanouts on the system. I would get those checked once in a while. So some of the older buildings, if you're in a building that's built in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, if the perma drains have never been checked, I almost guarantee you they're probably almost blocked. It's just you don't know it because it's not causing an issue in the building. Some buildings, and some people are going to get mad at me for saying this, are fine to leave the perma drain system blocked. I have a rental house I own on Capel Street, and the system is totally blocked. And I just leave it because it never causes an issue in the house. The house is a little bit higher on the hill. The water just drains through the dirt, and I've owned the house for 15 years now, and I've never had an issue. It's gone through these atmospheric rivers and all this. So let your plumber decide if that's, you know, have a conversation with your plumber, whoever comes out to look at the system. But yeah, so I'm not saying, you know, perma drains, it's good to leave them if they're blocked, but some buildings, it can be a costly expense. And if it's not causing any issues in the building and it's been blocked for years, I'm sure you've got other things you need to spend money on. But if you do have a newer building, it's good to check those perma drains once in a while with the cleanouts. Make sure they're operating properly, because it's a lot easier to maintain it than it is to fix it when it blocks and something happens. So just make sure you're getting those perma drains blocked once in a while. And like I say, if you have an older building, if you're worried about it, just call in a plumber to have a look at it. And yeah, and just if it is totally blocked and you haven't had an issue, you make the decision if you want to go ahead and start replacing perma drains, or if it's best to leave it just as is. So okay, that's it on that, the perma drains. So actually, one thing yeah, we went over what happens if it backs up. So next thing, so this is a real important one, storm pumps. So if you have a condo building, especially a lot of these newer buildings where the parkades are going down 60 feet in the floor, 60 feet in the ground, chances are you've got these big storm pumps down in the basement. Usually they're big systems. They're called duplex systems, meaning there's two pumps in the pit, and they're big pumps. This is a very important thing to maintain and make sure they're being checked. I tell people to check these twice a year, every fall, every spring, and make sure they're working. If these pumps fail in a parkade, I can show you some pictures of disasters where water is almost up above cars, the base of the car's floorboards almost coming in. And just to get rid of the water to work on the system, you can be into $3,000–4,000. Whereas if the system was just being checked, it would have never happened. The storm pumps, what they do is, because the parkades are down lower, so anytime a drainage pipe is below the city outfall or below the city drainage level, it needs to have a pump on it. So any of these buildings with parkades, chances are, like I say, they have pumps that are pumping that groundwater out, and it's a lot of water that comes into those pits when those parkades are going down 50 feet in the ground, 40 feet in the ground. So yeah, you really have to maintain those pumps. So when the pumps are being checked, again, all we're doing is voltage amperage checks on the pumps. We're making sure the bearings and all that sounds good. We're making sure the check valves on the systems are operating properly. A lot of times when these pumps fail, it's actually failed because when the pumps come up, there's two pumps, and then it ties into one. So if the check valve on this pump fails, when this one comes on, water pumps over, and then it's going to start running back down into this pump because the check valve's not closed. So then it just allows the pump to run continuously till it burns out, and nobody knows that's been going on until the system fails. So we check the check valves, the pumps, voltage checks, and we make sure in the pit. Another thing that causes pumps to fail is people putting stuff down the storm drains that shouldn't be in there. A real common one now is we were seeing needles in pits. You can see chunks of wood in pits. You see rocks, construction debris. Brand new buildings, you think it's good because it's newly built. Well, a lot of these new pits have a ton of construction debris sitting in the pits. Pumps suck it up, and then the pumps are toast. So yeah. So make sure that you're checking those pumps all the time, so it'll help them from not failing. So if the pumps do fail, if you ever hear failing, the way you'll know, you'll hear a high water alarm probably come on down just like the sewage pumps. There'll be a box on the wall, control panel somewhere. It'll probably have a little red light on it, or usually it has a little red light. If it doesn't, they'll have a red light and an alarm. Some just have an alarm on them. But if you hear that alarm, don't hit silence on the panel. Every panel has a little button that says silence. And I've been to so many buildings where we get called out and the park gate's filled with water and they say, oh yeah, I heard this alarm going 2 days ago and I hit the silence button on it. It was driving me crazy. I didn't know what it was for. So if there's an alarm going off, again, don't ignore it. Don't hit silence on it. Or you can hit silence, but if you do, make sure you're calling a plumber or somebody out to have a look and see why the alarm's going off. So yeah, so that's it on the storm pumps. Excuse me. We'll get into the potable water system. Potables, I think most of you guys know, is drinking water for the building. Maintenance on, there's not a lot of maintenance you can do on the pipes. The pipes are within the walls. We can't maintain the pipes on a potable system. You don't put augers down the potable system pipes, but there is components on the system that are to be maintained. We'll start off first with the pressure reducing valves on the building. So where the water mains enter the condo building, the mechanical room, the water entry room, you'll see a valve, the pressure reducing valves. So what these valves are doing, they're reducing the city pressure. So most of your city pressures now are boosted. They're around depending where you are in Victoria, they can be from 100 PSI up to 160, 170 PSI. So that's way too high within a condominium building or anywhere, a house for water to be going to the plumbing fixtures. Plumbing code is anything over 85 PSI requires a pressure reducing valve on the water main. So all it's doing is reducing that city pressure to a set pressure. The pressure reducing valve, the plumber has set it at to distribute water throughout the building. So it's important to check this again once a year, probably in a building. If you don't check it, you're not going to know there's a problem until things start failing in the building. When the pressure goes real high, obviously it's putting a lot of stress on the piping. We see some buildings where the relief valves start blowing off on the hot water tanks. Again, it's due to high pressure. It puts stress on the hot water tanks. It puts stress on the boiler systems. Within units, taps and that are really only designed to operate there. If you ever look at the manufacturer, most of them say they want a max pressure rating of about 85 PSI on those plumbing fixtures. If it's higher, it's going to wear them out a lot faster and can cause things to fail. So, and nobody's going to know the water pressure is too high until something does fail. Sometimes it won't even fail right off. Like if the city pressure is only say 120 pounds, you're not going to notice any big problems, but you're going to start finding plumbing fixtures need to be replaced a lot sooner. And pipes will wear out faster, stuff like that. So make sure the pressure reducing valves are getting checked every once in a while. I think most buildings probably, if you have a central hot water system, will probably have a boiler company in there servicing the boilers. So make sure maybe when that company's in there, it only takes a minute to check the pressure reducing valve. So make sure that's being checked at the same time. So yeah, make sure those are being checked. The next most important thing is the main water shutoff valves. Maybe this has probably been put ahead before the pressure reducing valve, but anyways, make sure the main water shutoff valves work in a building and make sure you know where they are. So obvious reasons on this. I can't count how many times we come to a building, there's a flood there, we go to shut off the valve and the valve's not working. And then we find out that multiple estimates have been sent into the building to replace the main shutoff and it's been put aside because again, people think, oh, it's fine. It's, we got other things we got to do. We got to paint the building or we got to fix the garden and we're not going to need the main shutoff. It's only needed if something fails. What are the chances of something failing? Something will fail one day and we're going to need that shutoff. So make sure those valves are working. Again, it doesn't take long to check the valve. You go in there, you turn it off for just a minute and you'll know if it's off or not. Maybe again, when a plumber is doing service work on the boiler or getting a backflow assembly checked, which we'll get into that later, we can just check the main water shutoffs. The other big issue is if you're not checking them once in a while, the old gate valves, they'll seize. You won't be able to turn the handle. You'll go in there and water's going to be going everywhere and you're going to be sitting on the valve trying to turn it with a wrench and the whole thing's going to be seized because maybe it's in a building where it hasn't been turned off in years. So just make sure that valve, the main water shutoff valve for the building, that you know where it is in emergency because again, a plumber sometimes can't get out there right away, and make sure it works. So they're usually located in the water entry rooms of the buildings, maybe in a boiler room or a sprinkler room or something like that. So that's it on the main water shutoffs. We'll move on to booster pumps. So the booster pumps on the building. So if you're living in a building that's probably anywhere over 8 stories. This varies a little bit depending on city pressure when the building was built. The plumbing system, the water system has booster pumps on it. Basically booster pumps, all they are is they boost the water pressure to provide water pressure to the top floors. So the water pressure is coming in from the city only at 60 pounds. So you're only gonna have like, if you're in a 15-story, probably by the time you get up to the 12th floor, you're gonna have like 20 pounds water pressure, which isn't enough. So these booster pumps, they're down in the parkade usually somewhere, and they just basically boosting the pressures of the system. Make sure they're being maintained yearly. Again, get a qualified person in there that knows how to work on the panels of the systems, make sure the electronics are all working okay. They have sensors that are sensing the incoming and outgoing pressure of the system. Make sure they're not starting to make a bunch of bearing noise. Because again, you can save, you hear the pumps making bearing noises and stuff like that, it's an issue, they're gonna fail. So it's better to fix it before it fails, because again, usually these things fail on a holiday, a long weekend, something like that. The booster pump systems go down, then the top half of the building has no water. And with these booster pumps in particular, usually parts have to be ordered in for them. So if they do fail, if both pumps go down, usually you're having to wait for parts to come in. So they have regular maintenance, you won't have to worry. You won't have to worry about the system failing. So problems will be addressed before it happens. So that's it on booster pumps. Here's another big one, backflow assemblies. Chances are you've had CRD out at your building and wondering what the heck, why do we have to put all these things in, and this is ridiculous. I partly agree sometimes with it. So anyways, the CRD has been going out to all the buildings in Victoria, requiring these backflow assemblies being put on the domestic water mains, the fire mains, the irrigation systems, boiler supplies, and all that. So what the backflow assemblies are, if you look in the picture, all it is basically it's a valve that has 2 little check valves on the inside. So what the CRD is doing, and I get what they're doing, is they don't want, if the city has the water off to the building, they don't want the building water being siphoned back into the city mains in case that water is contaminated. So say someone in the building, for whatever reason, had a bathtub full of fertilizer water, had a hose hooked up, and it was hooked up to a pipe, and then the city turned the water off and all that dirty fertilizer water was being siphoned back into the potable system. That's what these backflow assemblies for. So again, irrigation systems, when the irrigation system's off, if the lawn has fertilizer, or say there's an irrigation head that's around where someone was just changing oil on their car and it's sitting a bunch of oil and the city shut the water off to the building, well, all that would start getting siphoned back into the potable system. So that's what these valves are for. They're to protect the water that's not being contaminated. Same with on the fire systems. So fire systems have steel piping, iron piping. So on the inside of that piping, it rusts up. It's nothing to worry about in the fire system because you don't drink out of that water. But what happens is that's connected in a lot of buildings to the potable supply. So if the city main was broken, all that water would siphon back out of the fire main into the potable system if you didn't have a double check valve on it, and then it would contaminate your potable water. So that's why these are important to have on the system. So if we just go back to that slide for 1 minute. So what the CRD wants, it's now code to have, it's actually been code for a while, just they're getting on top of it more, is they want to make sure these check valves are installed. Once the backflow assemblies, I call them check valves, backflow assemblies, same thing. Once they're installed, the CRD will send a letter out to you yearly to have them checked. So if you look at the picture on the left, above the person's hand there, you'll see 4 little ports coming out of the top of the backflow assembly. That's where a plumber such as us comes in, puts a gauge on it, and we do a test to make sure those check valves are holding. Then we send a report into the CRD. So if anyone ever wants to know why the CRD is mandating all this and what's being done, this is kind of what's being done on it, is we do a test report. If the backflow assembly fails, it has to be fixed or replaced. The CRD will mandate it. It's not something that you can put off that I know of. The CRD is going to say when we have a failed test report, we have to rectify that issue. So yeah, so that's it on backflow assemblies. Next thing to go over, hot water system. So a lot of buildings have a central hot water system, meaning a boiler or commercial hot water tanks down in the basement that supply hot water to the entire building. Again, make sure those are being serviced once a year, twice a year. We don't do boiler work, so if whatever your boiler company recommends servicing, just go with what they say. Don't let the system run without being serviced. These systems have to be serviced. The heat exchangers have to be replaced, or sorry, cleaned. The condensate neutralizers on these new systems have to be cleaned out. All the other stuff they do on the system, make sure it's being serviced, because again, a problem will happen if it's not being serviced. Same with your commercial gas tanks, make sure those are being serviced probably yearly. Again, they clean the burner trays on them, check the gas pressures, that everything's operating properly. And when it's being serviced, usually we or who's ever doing it can tell if the system's real rusted and it's starting to fail. If you never go in that room, you don't know if it's rusted. And then all of a sudden the tank or the boiler explodes and you got a big flood in the building. Again, it could have been prevented. So make sure it's being serviced, the gas boilers or hot water tanks. Same with commercial electric hot water tanks. A lot of buildings have just a commercial electric hot water tank or multiple ones. Make sure they're being checked. All we do is say once a year is go in, we pull the covers off them, and we can tell the condition of the tank. Most of these commercial electric tanks start to fail around the heating elements because that's where all the expansion contraction happens when the tanks are heating. So make sure someone's coming in and check those once a year. If they're not being checked, usually you won't know there's a problem until it's leaking. And sometimes these tanks don't just slowly leak. Sometimes they just blow. What happens, the elements will pop out of them and there'll be a big flood in the building. So make sure those tanks are being checked. So it doesn't take long to check them. The other thing that's being checked is when you have multiple commercial electric tanks, you might not know one's not working. And the electrical, sometimes what happens in these tanks, the heating elements fail. So when they short, it actually causes a fuse in the electrical panel to burn out, or to blow. So then the tank has no power. So now all of a sudden, say the building has 2 hot water tanks, all of a sudden just one tank's doing all the work. You don't know it because you're still getting hot water. But what happens is now that tank's being overworked because it's getting 3 times the use it should, and it'll fail sooner. So you'll actually have one dead tank there, and then one, the life expected, or it's gonna fail a lot sooner. So that's the other reason why to get them checked. So with units, so a lot of condo units have their own individual hot water tanks within a unit. Not much to service on those. You don't need to get them serviced or not. I usually tell people just call if if they're running out of hot water, or if you notice it leaking, then call a plumber. But with the individual hot water tanks, I'd say you probably just leave them in there. There's not much to service on an electric hot water tank. You'll know if something fails on the system. All it is 2 elements and 2 thermostats. Just make sure on those individual unit hot water tanks that they're being replaced when the warranty's up. Don't let them go longer than a couple of years past the warranty. These manufacturers have these systems dialed in now, or these tanks dialed in. Is if it's under normal use, chances are it's going to blow within a few years past its warranty. If the tank's never used and people are away on holidays for 6 months out of the year and it's only 1 or 2 people live in the unit, the tank might go a lot longer. But I think now insurance companies are going to give you a hard time if the tank blows when it's 10 years past its warranty and flooded out 10 other units below you. So just make sure those tanks are being replaced when the warranty's up. Most of those tanks have an 8-year warranty, 6 to 8 year warranty on a standard 40-gallon or 60-gallon tank in a unit. Another big question we're getting asked about now is the lifetime warranty tanks. So Rheem makes a hot water tank called the Marathon. It's a fiberglass tank. So it's only a lifetime warranty tank with the person that purchased it, and it has to be registered through the manufacturer. So if you register the tank, you have the lifetime warranty on the tank. If you sell the unit, the new owner does not get the warranty, the lifetime warranty. It resets back to a 10-year warranty. If you didn't register the hot water tank, it's a 10-year warranty. So here's the problem we're having in condominium buildings now. I've had calls from some owners who we put these tanks in, and they're saying their insurance company wants a tank replaced after 10 years. So I've talked to a few of these insurance adjusters, and they're saying, yeah, even though they're lifetime warranty, they can't keep track, the building insurer can't keep track of units being bought and sold. So they want those tanks being replaced now when basically the base warranty is up. So it's something to check. Some insurers might allow you to have it, but if you're getting a lifetime warranty tank, make sure you talk to your insurance adjuster and probably the strata to see if they'll let you keep that tank in for a lifetime. Because like I said, we've had some buildings now where they have the lifetime warranty tank and they're being told they got to replace it after 10 years. So they've just paid double the amount for a lifetime warranty tank and they're being told to take them out. We've actually seen some of the lifetime warranty tanks fail, not too many. So I don't know if it's something we're going to see more in time, but we're seeing them go. The actual tanks themselves aren't leaking their fiberglass, but they have like a crimp fitting where it connects to the water connection where you hook your pipes up to, and we're starting to see those leak. We just had one last week. So, but just be wary of the lifetime warranty tanks. If you're in a house, you're probably fine. You're going to stay in that house for a while. Again, just check with your home or your insurance company that they will honor that. They won't make you replace a tank after 10 years. So that's it on the lifetime warranty tanks. Next up, tankless hot water heaters. So on-demand water heaters, the gas ones. If the building has them, they're great. So if you have them in a unit, again, they need to be serviced. Or I don't say they need to be, but I get them checked every couple of years. If you have one in your unit, they have little water filters on that can block up. Just a little sensors and that we got to check those. There's an air inlet screen on them. They got to be checked. So if you have a tankless hot water system in your unit, probably just get it checked every couple of years. It doesn't take long to do it. Frequently asked question we get is units that have electric hot water tanks and they want to switch them over to gas tankless. You can't do it without major work to the building system. So if you have an electric tank, I'd stay with an electric tank. Again, you can have a plumber come out, take a look at it if you want to assess it, just to make sure. Every building's different. But I have not come across a condo unit yet in a condominium building where we can take an electric tank out and put a gas tank in. They have to be vented, which means running pipes up to the roof or out the sidewall of the building. So that's got to be approved by the strata. Chances are there's no gas to the unit. Even if there's a gas line to the unit for a gas fireplace, it's probably undersized to handle a tankless water heater. So again, you can always call, ask a plumber, it doesn't hurt, but it'd be a big job to run put a tankless gas water heater in. Another question we get asked is if you can put an electric tankless hot water heater. The question is no, you can't get an electric tankless system that will be able to meet the demand of what running showers and laundry and all that stuff. You'd have to upsize your breaker, the electrical to the unit. Again, the electrical to the building, it'd be a huge job. So I haven't come across a unit where we can add just a tankless hot water heater. I actually haven't even seen one in Victoria. We see the odd electric heater that's connected to a storage tank. So basically it acts as a boiler. I think that would be kind of ridiculous to have for a condo unit and it would cost a fortune. So I would stick with just an electric hot water tank. So
I hate to interrupt you, Gary.
Yeah.
We're closing in on 1 o'clock and I'm wondering.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No,
So
it's great.
I can speed this up. I'm actually almost done here. So
awesome. Let's
okay, I'll go over real quickly. Expansion tanks aren't a big thing. We don't need to go over that. So we'll flip to the next slide. So poly B piping. This is a big one everybody wants to talk about. So poly B piping is a gray plastic piping you see in a building condo unit. The problems we're seeing with it now is it gets brittle. So I never used to think, people were telling me there's problems with poly B piping. Same my dad would hear this and we're like, no, there wasn't a problem with the poly B piping. It was just the fittings, the plastic fittings on it. We're now coming across buildings where the poly B piping itself is starting to fail. It's getting brittle. What we're seeing, it gets brittle and it cracks. It's not to say every building's going to have that issue. There's a lot of buildings we see with poly B piping. The piping's still in great shape. But I know of a few buildings, a handful already, where we're starting to see leaks. I know some of them have had them repiped. So what to do if you have poly B piping, talk to your insurance adjuster, because I can say the piping's still in good shape and the insurance adjuster is going to say, or the insurance person is going to say, you got to replace it. Replacing the poly B piping in the building is a big job. It's not something we get into, not yet at least. We might get into it. It's something we're looking at, but There are some companies there's one company in particular out of Vancouver that specializes in repipes. They've done some buildings here in Victoria. I think they've done a good job, but if you have poly B, there's not a lot. You just got to talk to your insurance company, see if they're going to allow the building to be insured. I don't know that end of it. And for me, I have seen leaks occurring now in poly B piping. I'm sure we're going to see it more and more. So it is something to watch out for. So it was a piping, it was used in the mid-90s, early mid-90s of buildings, and then they switched to PEX. So if you see a bluish gray pipe like you see in the picture, that's the poly B piping. I guess last thing, a few other things we can bring up here is there's a few buildings with this type of piping in the building, flow guard PVC piping. If you have it, you probably already know. There's very few buildings that have it. If you see this PVC piping in the building, it's kind of a yellowish white color. This is a bad picture. This was a bad product. So again, I'm sure your insurance company's probably already brought it up already, but these pipes fail quite often in buildings. But like I said, there's very few buildings that have this piping within the building. Galvanized piping, it was used in older buildings. It's not used anymore. If the building was built in the 50s or earlier, it might have it. You can see in this picture how it rusts up on the inside, causes a bunch of problems within the plumbing system. Again, the only way to fix the galvanized piping is to replace it, which involves opening walls. I don't think many of the stratas here will have galvanized piping. So I think we can probably skip over that one. Hot water recirculation piping. Buildings with central hot water systems have a recirc line that circulates the hot water throughout the building. In time, if it's copper piping, it wears thin. If you start getting pinhole leaks, if the plumber says there's been pinhole leaks on the hot water recirculation piping, it's not going to stop leaking. It's going to keep getting more and more leaks. So get quotes to replace that hot water recirculation piping, especially with asbestos now. If you have asbestos in your building, each leak, we got to come open a hole in the wall. That's usually $1,000 for the hole and another $1,000 to fix the leak. So if you keep getting little pinhole leaks, it adds up fast. So if you are having problems with the copper recirculation line, I would look at getting it replaced. Some of the newer buildings, they have PEX hot water recirculation lines. The PEX, again, the piping itself doesn't pinhole and wear out, but the fittings do. And the problem we're seeing in the new buildings is the pumps are oversized or they're set on the wrong setting. So if you have a newer building, anything built 2000s and up, I would say make sure your plumber there checks that recirculation pump that's not set on too high of a setting and that's not oversized for the building. It's quick to check because the PEX piping doesn't wear out, but the fittings do, and they'll just snap and cause a big flood in the building. So make sure that's being checked. It'll save the life of the recirc line. Manifolds, we can probably skip over this. We won't get into that. So laundry hoses, something for condo owners to be aware of. If you have a rubber laundry hose on it, make sure on the hoses they have an expiry date stamped on them. Not many people know this. If the laundry hose is older than 5-6 years, I get someone to check that laundry hose, and most of them are only warranted for about 5 years at the most, and get switched over to a braided laundry hose. So if you have rubber hoses, get them checked and switch over to the braided hose. Supply tubes, again, I think the main thing on this, if you have poly B supply tubes, so this is a little pipe on your sink that goes from your shutoff valve to your tap or to your toilet. If you see a gray, bluish gray plastic supply tube, get that replaced with braided. So it's poly B. Insurance might give you a hard time if that blows. So you skip over that. Flood prevention. So this is a big one. If you have a hot water tank in a unit and a condominium building, I don't know why this isn't in code. I would recommend installing a flood stop shutoff valve if the building's worried about floods and that. I don't know why this isn't in the code because we've had these shutoff valves out for years. So the ones I recommend is the one in the picture here shown. It's called the flood stop shutoff. It's a little sensor that goes at the bottom of the tank and a valve. You see there the brass colored piece and a little control panel on the wall. So what it will do, it'll sense a water leak and it'll automatically shut the tank off. Again, you don't have to get this done, but something I recommend because it can save a lot of floods down the road. So yeah, there's some other products out there like Moen, Flow, and Maestro and Growy Sense. I'm not a big fan of them, so I shouldn't say this on this. We've put some of them in, and what they do, they send false alarms. So they're always failing, or I shouldn't say failing, but they'll be sending owners like notifications there's a leak when there's not, and people are shutting them off. And Yeah, so the simplest one's the flood stop shut off, so. Outside taps in condos, make sure the water's turned off in the winter time to them. And if you have a frost-free tap, make sure the hose is disconnected. If you don't know if you have a frost-free tap, just make sure the hose is disconnected to the outside tap in winter time. Because if the if a hose is hooked up to it, especially the nozzle on the end, the water in the pipe can't drain. So when you shut the water off the outside tap, you want to open up the tap so the water can drain out of it. And if you have a hose hooked up, it won't drain, and then we see burst pipes and walls. So make sure you're shutting off the water off the outside taps. If you have a frost-free tap, make sure the hose is disconnected. Preventing floods in units. We went over this real quickly. Install flood stop shutoffs. They're great on hot water tanks. You can actually get them for your laundry machine and your dishwasher too. So those are the most common causes of floods from appliances in units. Replace hot water tanks when the warranty's up. Replace laundry hoses on appliances if they're old rubber hoses. Replace the poly supply tubes. Ensure the bathtub tap trim in your unit is sealed to the tile surround. We see so many new buildings now where they brand new built buildings where that trim's not sealed, and people are having showers and there's gaps around the spout or the trim. If there's a gap there, water's going into the wall and using that shower. So make sure those are sealed and the trim's tight. If taps are leaking around the handle, don't ignore it. If you turn your handle on single lever and water's coming out around the handle, it's probably going into the wall. So make sure you get that fixed. Make sure the fixture isolation valves work underneath your sinks. Turn them and make sure they work. We brought this up, if your sink's making noises when you're not using it, it's probably a sign the stack's starting to back up. Don't ignore sounds that you're not familiar with. Call a plumber right away or call the strata. If the unit has a main shutoff valve, if your own unit, make sure it works. Turn the water off when you go away on holidays. Not all condominium units you can turn the water off to, but if you can, turn it off and make sure somebody's checking on the unit when you're away. Even with the water off, a stack can back up in your unit. So make sure somebody's checking on it once in a while. Turn off the outside taps in wintertime and disconnect the hoses. Don't flush sanitary wipes down the toilets because it's going to be an issue, I guarantee you. And call a plumber if you suspect or hear a leak. So sorry to run through this right away. One other big thing, if a condo owner's getting renovations done, strata, make sure there's a permit on it. If someone's just swapping out a sink or a toilet, you don't need a permit on that, or a hot water tank. But if someone's getting a big job done, new tub surround going in, and they cut into the firewall and they're pulling the tub out and they're moving the sink from one end of the unit to the other, make sure there's a permit on it. If the contractor says the permit's not required, they're wrong. The permit is required. So if you're ever unsure if a permit's required, you can always call the city. Just say, this is what's going on in here. Do you think we need a permit? So, and make sure, I think most people know this, that everybody's insured that's working in your building. Because like us, I've had, the odd time I cut a pipe where I shouldn't, or somebody has, and there's been a leak, and that's what we have insurance for. I guess story time, we can probably skip over this. Because we're doing question and answers.
Yeah, let's
real
just
quick.
take a peek
Yeah.
at what we've got here. Looks like we have 6 questions. So this was at the beginning. How do you maintain the stack?
So yeah, I can answer that live. So maintaining the stack, the question was, how do you maintain the stack? Again, it's getting them cleaned out. It varies for each building, but kitchen stacks is the main one, is getting them cleaned out yearly, I'd say, with kitchen stacks with buildings with carburetors. It's hard. I wouldn't leave a kitchen stack in a building any longer than 3 years. Even if you had a backup, you leave it 3-4 years, all of a sudden the grease builds up and it makes it a lot harder for us to clear it. And then the stack job takes twice as long and it can cause a backup in a unit. So kitchen stacks, maintaining them is just having the plumbers come in, cleaning them out, flushing them, cammering them. Bathroom stacks don't have to be cleaned out as much. You can talk to us or the plumbing contractor that you use to see how often you think the bathroom stacks need to be cleaned. And if there's laterals in the parkade, which is part of the stack system, that's the best way of telling the condition of those stacks. So
I'm skipping down a bit. There's a question about stacks in townhouses.
Yeah, okay, great question. So the stacks, so if there's no unit above you, you're not going to cause a flood. So the unit, what will happen if the stack blocks, just your drain will stop draining. So so if you're in a townhouse with no other townhouse above you, I'd say you don't need to do stacks. You're going to know when there's a problem. The whole idea of doing the stacks in the building is to prevent a unit from flooding out when other units above are using water. So if you're in a house and stuff like that, you probably don't need to do the stacks. The idea of cleaning the stacks out is you can't control in a multi-story building what the people are doing above you. So if that stacked blocks down here, all the people here are using water, it's gonna flood this unit out. So that's why it's important to get the stacks done in multi-floor buildings. So that's the main reason why they're getting cleaned, is to prevent a flood from happening in somebody's unit. If you're in a townhouse, it's not gonna flood because you're the only one using the water. So I hope that answers that question good.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
On which panel would you see, an alarm from a sewage pump?
Yeah, that's a, on which panel would you see? So the pumps themselves down in the parkade, if you know where the pumps are, you see like a gray box on the wall with some lights, and it'll say a duplex sewage pump system or storm system. If you're unsure, probably have a plumber out there to point it out. It's different in every building, where the panels are, and different pump manufacturers use different panels. So, but if you see a panel on the wall in the parquet with a little light on it, some of them have those switches sticking out, and pictures of pumps, sometimes I'll have pictures of pumps on it, that's the sewage pump control panel or storm pump control panel. So,
Alrighty, what's the best way to keep your carburetor clean?
we get asked this all the time. Run lots of water. Don't save water using a carburetor. There's all these myths, putting ice cubes down sharpens blades and all this stuff. They don't, carburetors actually don't even have sharp blades in them. All it does, it's centrifugal. It just flings everything out to the side walls of the carburetor and scrapes it off. But use lots of water with your carburetor. Don't put coffee grounds down the carburetor. Don't put down a bunch of bones and all that stuff. Don't show all your friends how strong your carburetor is by putting stuff down you shouldn't. So main thing with carburetors, use lots of water. When you're done using your carburetor, even let the tap run for a good 20-30 seconds after. It helps, especially with all the new buildings, the low flow taps, there's not much water. So you want lots of water going into that stack while you're using the carburetor. So, yeah.
In townhouses, who's responsible to maintain the pressure reducing valve and the backflow assembly?
I would say, so if it's for the building, if it's on the main coming in before it's in the townhouse, I'd say it would be the stratas. Don't get mad at me if I'm wrong. Every strata seems different. I hate answering these questions on whose responsibility it is, because I'm always in trouble. I usually seem to answer it wrong, but if it's on the main, so townhouses either have a pressure reducing valve on the main coming in the ground, but a lot of them have the pressure reducing valves within the unit. So each townhouse will have its own pressure reducing valve. If that's the case, I would assume it's probably the owner of the unit's responsibility to maintain it.
That's
But
right. Yeah.
yeah, and then the backflow assemblies, they're usually strata responsibility. So the backflow assembly would be on the actual main coming into the complex, and would be on the irrigation main that supplies irrigation for the whole complex. So I figured that would be strata. There wouldn't be an individual backflow for each unit.
No.
Not saying there's not a building like that, but I haven't seen one yet.
Perfect. I totally agree.
Risk of failure of poly B piping water lines, Victoria. So again, I hadn't seen any poly B water lines fail up till the last few years. We're starting to see it. So we do work at a ton of buildings that have poly B piping, and I say the poly B piping is still in great shape. But the buildings that are having the failures, I used to say that about their systems too. And my dad would say that. And then now we're seeing, oh my God, the poly B piping is actually failing here. So, yeah, I can't answer that question. I'd say, yeah, I don't know. I think the main thing with the poly B piping is if the insurance company is going to insure you with it. I'd be almost more worried about that right now. There is a few buildings, I don't want to name buildings, but there is a few buildings I know are looking at getting repiped because they're having issues with poly B piping. And I know a few buildings that have already been repiped because of poly B piping. Some of them have been repiped just because the insurance, not because they're having failures. And there's a couple buildings I know right now. One I was just talking to yesterday is getting leaks once a month on the poly B piping. So to me, it's odd that some buildings are getting it, some aren't when they're built in the same era, but it might be due to pressure in the system. Is the piping undersized a bit where it's getting more, it has more stress. So this goes back to checking the pressure reducing valves and all that. But I think it just depends how the system is sized and pressures within the building is going to determine if that poly B pipe is going to fail sooner or later. So, but yeah.
Thanks, Gary. We'll do one more question and then
Yeah.
we'll wrap things up because we are over time.
Yeah.
In winter, after disconnecting your hose, do you need to do anything else?
Yeah, so if you have a frost-free tap, I wish I brought one in here for a prop. So frost-free tap, if you look at your outside tap and it's got like a little flange on it where it screws to the wall, chances are that's a frost-free tap. So you just turn the tap off, leave the hose disconnected, and it's good. You don't need to shut off anything inside. A lot of frost-free taps do have shutoffs on the inside, so if you do have a shutoff for your outside tap, turn it off. If it's frost-free or not, turn it off for winter time. And then yeah, so for non-frost-free tap, same thing. Turn the water off to the tap in wintertime on the inside. Once the water's off, open up the tap outside to drain all that water out. And to do that, you need the hose disconnected. So and yeah, so. And like I say, the frost-free taps, I wish I had a picture of one, but if you're unsure, you can always take a picture of one, email it to us or email it to a plumbing contractor and ask them if this is a frost-free tap. So, yeah,
Awesome.
I hope that helps. Sorry, first time doing a presentation like this, so yeah.
Well, that's fantastic, Gary. This has been really great. I'm so appreciative of you coming. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. I'm so sorry that we ran over time, but it's just so exciting to talk about plumbing.
Sorry, I was nervous. It's my first time doing a presentation.
That's
like this,
okay.
So, yeah, I'm sure I spoke too quick on a few things.
That's all good. I'm gonna pass it over to Catherine. I don't know if I think she has some closing comments before we head out here.
Just a couple things, just tidying up the odds and ends. Thanks to everyone who attended and who's still there. Like I said, we did record the session and we will be sending out a link to the recording in the coming week. Feel free to share it with any other council members or other people who you think would be interested. We'll also be posting it to our YouTube channel so you can find it and past sessions there. If you forget where your email is that had the link in it. As mentioned, if you have any questions or comments, I think I mentioned this, but there's a survey just as you end the session. So please fill it out. That's great feedback. We do read it all and try to take advice from it. Or feel free to reach out to me directly. You have my email because I'm the one who sent you the invite. We'll always be working on new sessions. So if you have any suggestions of other people that you would love to hear from, like Garry, thank you, Garry. This was actually really interesting for me. Who knew plumbing was so fascinating? And that brings us to the end. Thanks again for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your day.